while I'm at it, let me blow through the Mid-Year Freakout book tag. Give me an opportunity to talk about some of the stuff I've been reading all year, because it has not been a bad reading year, even though I didn't make any videos. What I did is I ended up reading a lot of series books. I read, and some of these are not reads, some of these are audiobooks, because I like to, for audiobooks, I like to have one going at all times, and I usually pick a book I've actually read in the past, so I don't have to worry about missing things when I zone out, when I walk or whatever. So I read a lot of Richard Stark novels, Parker novels. I finished that whole series. Those are mostly on audio. A couple I didn't have the audiobooks available, so I actually read them like a normal person. But I'm going to kind of go through my list of stuff reading here on the side and the questions on the phone at the same time. I don't know if I have to credit anybody on this. I think it's just an ancient tag. Anyway, so here are the prompts. Best book you've read so far this year. Okay. Some of these, I'm just going to be random. I'm not going to worry too much about it if nothing really jumps out. One of the coolest books I read this year, and for some reason, most of my standouts, good and bad, are nonfiction, and mostly bad. But anyway, there's a crazy book by David McGowan called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. It is about Laurel Canyon. There was a big book that came out years ago about the Laurel Canyon sound. It started in the 1960s, rock and roll, Southern California rock scene with a lot of big names, and not the biggest names, not like the Beatles, but people like Crosby, Stills, Nash, and that. And this book comes from a series of blog posts that David McGowan did, and for that reason, it really doesn't have any conclusion. But he just lists all these insane coincidences, all these weird parallels, an alarming, bizarre number of 60s rock icons, from Frank Zappa to Jim Morrison to everybody else, had either parents who worked that were high up in the military. Like Jim Morrison's father was a commanding naval officer during the Gulf of Tonkin, and most of the people of the scene had a very different background than what people think of as the hippies. And there's a location there called Operation Lookout, I think it's called, where the CIA does a lot of crazy stuff and experimenting, and where the military did propaganda films, and it's all very much tied in also with Hollywood, where people where a lot of these groups were put together in much the same way that the Monkees on TV were put together. They were kind of cast, and there's a lot of studio musicians playing for the people that we think were actually playing on the records. And he just puts all this stuff together. I'm probably rambling about it, but it really doesn't come to any conclusion. It's just a very, very odd intersection of military intelligence, sons and daughters of super wealthy financiers that somehow found themselves into the music industry, and it just seems like it was a whole bunch of industry plans. So it's fun to read about. If you like conspiracy stuff, it's really wild how many coincidences he came up, and how many strange things he drew about different groups and different oddballs in this area. And of course, there's the Manson family and all these kind of things to play into it. So it's an interesting perspective on the 60s. It was very entertaining to read, and so I enjoyed that a lot. The best book I've read, there's a lot of good books, but I can't really single out one best book. Okay, best sequel you've read so far this year. Okay, well, among the Parker books, There's one that I think I had missed originally called Flashfire, which is excellent, which is one of the best Parker novels. He took a break about 20 years. There's the early group of Parker novels that he stopped writing in the mid-'70s. He got burned out on them. In the 90s, he got another idea, and probably people came up with a lot of scratch, because by then the Parker novels by Donald Westlake, writing as Richard Stark, were very popular as cult books. Parker's a thief, amoral thief kind of guy who's constantly getting screwed over or having jobs go wrong, and he has to go back and have revenge and stuff like that. So they're very hardcore crime novels. They're very well written. But then he started them up again, I think in the 90s, and about 3 or 4 in, he wrote an excellent one called Firebreak, one of his best novels. Another really great one is the second to last novel in the series that he wrote, which was Ask the Parrot. Nobody Runs Forever, Ask the Parrot, and Dirty Money are the final 3 Parker novels. Dirty Money's not that great. Westlake died very soon after that. I think he would have continued, but these last 3 books are a very tight sequence. The other books, there's time gaps in between, but here there's not. In which one? In Nobody Runs Forever, he has to abandon his loot, and he's about to be caught, and he just climbs up a mountain. In the opening of Ask the Parrot, he's still climbing up that mountain, and it's the next part of the adventure. He gets out of some of the trouble by the end of Ask the Parrot, and then he has a lot of trouble left over that he's still got to try and go back and get that money in the final book, Dirty Money. But Dirty Money was kind of a disappointment. I guess I'll call that a biggest disappointment, because probably wouldn't have minded, except that it is the very last Parker book there will ever be, so it was kind of sad that it didn't end on a high note, which would have been Ask the Parrot, or even better, lived a little longer and wrote another book as good as Flashfire or Ask the Parrot, or any of the early Parker novels like Slayground, or there's so many early ones that were great. Okay, what else? Biggest. Oh, I skipped over some here. That was best sequel. Then I skipped down to biggest disappointment. But there were other disappointments too. There definitely were. Fight. This book I read called Fight: Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House was terrible. It was a book written about the switch up between Biden and Harris, and the first 70 or 80 pages were pretty well researched, but they really banged us out right after the election. So the second half of the book is very poorly researched and very superficial, and just basically recaps news reports and stuff like that. So they and this is a trend with political books. Where they rush them out after the end of an administration. There'll probably be better books that come out later, but it was a waste of time to read, and I don't think it really made much of a splash, because then 2 weeks later, the Jake Tapper Cover Your Ass book, Jake Tapper's book about how he's completely guiltless in any kind of cover-up of the Biden administration. So, those books are always kind of a waste of time, and I'm kind of mad at myself that I didn't pay for it. I guess I did pay for it. That I got tricked into reading one of those quickie books, because they're not well researched. They're just done to be the first out. So that was kind of a bummer. It wasn't that good. What's a new release you haven't read but want to? There aren't any. I don't really read new releases. I'm against it in principle. See Fight, the one I just mentioned. It's just a waste of time to read a new book. Usually, if you've only got so much reading time, I think spend it reading on great books. And then if there's a book that's being written this year that's good, it'll still be good in 10 years, if you're alive, if I'm alive. So most anticipated release for the second half of the year. There are a couple I'm looking forward to just because they're ongoing series. One is Sharpe's Storm, which is a new Richard Sharpe novel from Bernard Cornwell. It's probably not going to be that good, but I want to read them all because I do always enjoy Sharpe. Cornwell manages to cram in a new adventure in between the 30 or whatever, 25 or 30 books about Sharpe that he's already written over the years. But it's nice to see him get back to that character because I could never really get into any of his other series very much, even though he wrote all those Viking books that people like, but I just can't get into them. And there's a book by, well, I'm probably not going to remember the name in time, but there's a book in another mystery series that I'm reading that's coming out this year. But once it comes out, I guess I'll talk about it if it's worth talking about. Okay, biggest disappointment. I went over that nonfiction book. Seems to be a cheat. There was another disappointing. Pretty much every nonfiction book I read is a disappointment. And I don't read that many. Slugfest. This was disappointment. Slugfest, inside the epic 50-year battle between Marvel and DC about the company rivalries, but there wasn't much new information in it. So that was kind of a bust too. I wanted more. I mean, I know the companies were rivals and people got hired back and forth, but I don't think that I'm really a comic book expert, but there wasn't new information in it for me, so maybe I am. Another big disappointment was Lord Fowl's Bane. I don't know why I tried to read this. Every once in a while I get the idea I'll read some epic fantasy. I never like it, so I don't know why I keep doing it, but I'm sure there's some good stuff out there besides Lord of the Rings, but the fantasy I like is sword and sorcery, of course, and traditional fantasy like the Gorman Guest books are probably my most favorite. But these books that came out in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and up till today, they're still trying to cash in on being variations on Tolkien. I'm never a big fan of. But Lord Fowl's Bane was supposed to be kind of dark and subversive, I guess, by Stephen R. Donaldson. And the first few chapters, I was really into it. The first few chapters are just read like a normal mainstream novel about this guy who's a leper, he's a best-selling writer. He wrote one best-selling book, became a leper, so his family left him, and everybody in town is afraid of him. It kind of starts like a Shirley Jackson novel or something, and like he goes in to pay his phone bill or light bill or whatever it was for the town, and somebody had already paid it because they don't want him coming into town. They don't want him around, because they're afraid they're going to catch leprosy. That stuff was interesting. Then he goes to the fantasy world. He meets this girl. He does something terrible. People probably know about it. I've read the books. And even having known that was in there, it's still pretty freaking terrible what he does. He essays this girl in a very brutal way, not in an ambiguously like men will be men, or kind of not in like an old-fashioned dated kind of book that you wouldn't read in a modern book, but might be just in a really vicious, horrible way. And I don't know, you're supposed to like this guy or care, I'm sure. Or you're supposed to just put up with him until he gets redeemed at the end. And then a couple chapters after that, I pushed on a little farther after that, and it was just the same old, follow the yellow brick road and get to the mountain of the tree of the chalice or whatever, and I just didn't care, so I quit reading it. My fault, because I never liked that crap. Okay, this is not exactly new to me, this next series I'm going to go over, but because I had read a couple of the books a few years ago, but much of my reading this year, and I guess these are actually audiobooks too. was the Aubrey and Maturin series by Patrick O'Brien, and these are wonderful, as everyone says. So, if you like seagoing tales, they really are the best, and they're not real swashbucklers in the way that like Captain Blood is, or the way that Hornblower is, Horatio Hornblower, or there's many other series like this. They're more than that. They're more like literary novels where the two main characters happen to be a naval officer and a spy, when they have all different kinds of adventures. And there's so many levels in those books. Really are as good as people say. You feel like the whole world. They're incredibly well researched, or at least they read like they're incredibly well researched. There's battles. Sometimes they don't even spend that much time in sea, depending on what happens. They get shipwrecked a couple times. They rescue another shipwrecked crew. They're held prisoner in Boston during the War of 1812. All kinds of things happen to them. They get married. That takes a few books for them to sort out their marriages, and they get money, and they get ripped off, and just you get to see. It's such a panorama of life in the Napoleanic era, right up till around 1815. And one of them, the doctor Stephen Maturin, is a naturalist. So when they're out in the Galapagos or different places they go in the world, the Indian Ocean or wherever, you get real sense of the nature and the different species and the whole wide world. And I think one's called The Whole Wide World, isn't it? No, one is called The Far Side of the World. If you've ever seen that movie with Russell Crowe and by Peter, I can't remember his name, but Master and Commander of The Far Side of the World. If you saw that movie and you liked that movie, then you will not be disappointed by the books. And if you're wondering about the books, you could even watch the movie. They do a very good job. Russell Crowe's excellent as Captain Aubrey, and the other guy, I forget his name, is pretty good as Stephen Maturin. Fantastic books. Just a whole world of living in 20 books, and you won't want them to end. So that was maybe my favorite new author, even though I'd read a couple of the first two books I read maybe 3 or 4 years ago. The second one I didn't like very much. It's very much an homage to Jane Austen. They ride horses a lot. They go courting a lot. They go on walks. It's not like the other books. So if you're not into, and I'm going to give Jane Austen a chance this year again, because I think it's time, but that I should do that. But the second book really doesn't really. I don't think he had decided at that time that he was going to be end up writing a double deuce of 20 of these, and he really wanted to write a book that was an homage to Jane Austen, who is Patrick O'Brien's favorite author. So then I think things start to even out and get better with book 3 and 4, when he decided that, well, it looks like this is my job now to write a lot of these books. They're very successful. So, and I believe those are the only books he wrote for the rest of his life, though he wrote some other novels earlier. But once he hit on that series, it became his thing, like with many series authors, especially the smart ones. If they have a hit series like Nero Wolfe or something, they stick with that, because it's hard to find one. Anyway, okay. Most anticipated release, did that. Biggest disappointment, biggest surprise, favorite new author. Newest favorite character, I don't, I guess Stephen Maturin, the doctor in the books I've been mentioning, the Patrick O'Brien, Aubrey and Maturin books. I think probably Stephen Maturin is probably my favorite new character, because all these others, I'm looking here, that's some of these are kind of too modern of questions for me. They're not the way I think about books. These are really kind of focused more on like series and things like that, I think. but who cares? I didn't have to. I did this myself. I forced this upon myself. Let's see. Newest favorite character. I'm going to pretend on some of these because these aren't favorites or anything. These are just people that stand out. I read for the first time Mastermind of Mars by Edgar S. Burroughs. When I was young, I read a lot of Edgar S. Burroughs, as many people who do these kind of channels do. I read the first 3 books. They're fantastic. The trilogy, Princess of Mars, Gods of Mars, and Warlord of Mars. Then the 4th book comes out. Then I came to the 4th book, which is about John Carter and Deja Thoris's son. This is like a Nepo baby book. It's like the son goes off and has his own adventure. It's very short. It's very dull. The Cartharus, his name is, has no character at all. Has no personality. It's the exact opposite of this is the fourth Barsoom book. It's the exact opposite of the 4th Tarzan book, which is called Son of Tarzan. Korak, Son of Tarzan, who is a brilliant character, a wonderful character, but Edgar S. Burroughs didn't do so well with the son of John Carter. It's just a flat, uninteresting character on a flat, uninteresting planet adventure to rescue some princess, which goes fine. Then the next book I had tried to read too was Chessmen of Mars, which is their other Nepo baby, John and Deja Thoris's other Nepo baby, their daughter, Lana of Gathal, I think her name is. And she has an adventure too. And this book I struggled through. I had read somewhere, I think that Michael Moorcock said it was one of Burroughs' best novels because of the concept of the chessmen and the concept of the game, but I couldn't get into it. So even though I love Edgar S. Burroughs and normally would say nothing against them, those books kind of ended my adventure with the Mars series. But this year I decided, for whatever reason, to pick them up again, and I read Mastermind of Mars, and I forget the name of the character, but there is it is a pretty good book, Mastermind of Mars. It starts out with a new hero gets transported to Mars from Earth. He really doesn't have that much heroing stuff to do, though. He gets hooked up with a mad scientist, the Mastermind of Mars, who's a very interesting character. He's kind of a Frankenstein-like character. I'm going to see if I remember his name. I'm going to look it up. Mastermind. And he's the Mastermind of Mars. And it's kind of a science fiction book because he's trying to bring people back to life, and this dead princess, and let's see what... so I kind of like that character. He's... God knows. The Mastermind of Mars. There's the famous... Rastavas, an elderly mad scientist. I like how they... Here's kind of an image of him. Here's the original cover from the pulps and Amazing Stories. You can see he's there, and this is the woman he's trying. He does like much like the Hammer movies version of Frankenstein. Peter Lorre. He's really obsessed with brain transplants or mind transplants and that kind of stuff. But it was really a fun book, and he was one of the most interesting characters I've read in later Burroughs. This is from the late 20s, so it's not all that late. So I've kept reading the Mars books after that because of that, and they're a mixed bag. I don't know why Burroughs gave up on the character of John Carter pretty much after the first 3 books. He's not a major character anymore. Oh, sorry about that. I'm not used to talking this much by myself. I have a lot of actual friends in the neighborhood here. I'm back in Albania. I'm in Durrës, Albania. And by the beach. It's too hot outside now. I'm not a beach guy, I decided. So maybe that's why I'm making videos again, because The beaches are so crowded. But I'm leaving here in a couple months, never to return. Headed for parts unknown. We can discuss that some other time. But I do have a plan, and it's not going back to the United States, at least not yet. Maybe for some paperwork or something, but plenty of places still to see. All right, so I lost the list of questions I was using. I'm pretty much rambling on them anyway. Books that made you cry. I'm going to cry because no books made me cry. I don't cry very much. Maybe I don't drink enough to cry. Hogg made me cry. Samuel Delany, Hogg. I read that because I ran across many of the videos that so many people do a good job on the most offensive books or the most disturbing books. So I finally did read Hogg. Hideous book. It kind of makes me not like Delany anymore, although, one time he was one of my favorite. Definitely at certain periods, like the Napoleanic books were among the only contemporary books, sci-fi books I was reading. Everything else was crime or Victorian novels or whatever. But, and there's some, you don't have to read Hogg, don't worry about it. In fact, it's not even that offensive, at least to me, because at a certain point, there's just so much disgusting stuff in it that you just zone out. It becomes comical. A book can't be that offensive to me because, a fiction book, because it's all made up, No snot was spread, whatever. Anyway, sorry to talk about that. There's plenty of videos about Hogg. It's not worth reading unless you just want to read the most insane stuff or you're a Delany completist, but at a certain point, you just shut down. So I don't know if that is his point or what. I believe his point, he said, is, he said it's not to write pornography for people to enjoy. It's for me to expose my own, something about himself, which is, I think it's legitimately. I think he has a legitimate reason for doing it, but so what? It's not like, it's almost like who cares? Let's see. Here's the craziest book I read. Speaking about offensive books or sexualized books or highly is a book called A Feast Unknown, which is another one I got off one of these different lists, which is an insane book by Philip Jose Farmer. Is it A Feast Unknown? Yeah. What happened to the other one? I read one more after this. Somebody hammering. Okay. A Feast Unknown is a book about Tarzan and Doc Savage meeting up, which is a very common Philip Jose Farmer kind of thing to do, except this is a very sexual book. It's like if you really want to read about erections for 200 pages, and he's got some idea too about violence and study of violence or whatever. It's just nuts. It becomes quite comical, these erections in this book, but then he wrote a couple of sequels then he solves the erection problem in the book. Oh, I've got these. I did some cutting here. And he does a couple more books that feature Tarzan, or his Tarzan. It's not really Tarzan and Doc Savage. It's supposed to be the real versions, the real world versions, and they're controlled by this evil cabal called the Nine. And that's what drew me to the book. I thought, this would be cool if they a couple pulp heroes fight some shadowy secret organization that has power over them and stuff. So they finished all the penis stuff, all the erection stuff, crazy erection stuff in the first book, and then he wrote a couple more books. They're just more straightforward adventure stories. So I guess he got it out of his system. It was something to do in the 60s. Who knows? It was a wild time. So, book that made you happy. Well, except for the ones I've mentioned, they all make me happy. Here's another. Oh man, I messed up all my. I overpasted something here. There's a book by. This book makes me happy. This is probably the best author I've discovered this year. It is Jack Ritchie, and he has a couple. He's a famous mystery crime short story writer. His most famous story was made into an Elaine May movie called New Leaf, which Elaine May adapted, starred in herself opposite Walter Matthau, in which she plays a what do you call it, botanist who's discovering a new fern, and she's very mousy and very intelligent, but very just focusing on her work and not conventionally attractive or thinking about that kind of thing. And this sleazy guy decides, but she's got a fortune, and this guy meets her, played by Walter Matthau in the movie. I haven't actually read the story yet. I'm not that far in the book, but he's a rich guy too, but he already blew his money, gambled through all his money, so he's going to marry her and murder her, is his plan. He'll woo her, which would be easy because she's really not worldly at all. She's very introverted, and then what happens to them, and so it's kind of black comedy, crime story. His stories are like that. They very much have twists, and I'm still looking for the cover. There's a couple of his books out now that are. Oh, I know. I got to get to the. Here it is. He wrote hundreds of stories. I think there's something like 500 stories published in Alfred Hitchcock Presents magazine, and 1,500 stories overall. Now the story A New Leaf was actually called something else. I don't remember what. But he changed it. After the movie. Even though the movie is a pretty big bomb, I believe Elaine May's first cut of that movie was 4 hours. And so it got taken away from her, like all her movies did, unfortunately. She had a really rocky career with her 4 movies that she published. that she directed herself, but she managed to work for many, many years as a screenplay doctor, because it's just not going to load. So I ended up talking more about Elaine May, who's one of my favorite directors, than I did about Jack Ritchie. But I discovered his book A New Leaf, and I've got another book by him, which is the best of Manhunt. This is a series that you can get. Manhunt was a short-lived mystery crime magazine in the late 50s through most of the 60s, digest size, like Alfred Hitchcock's or something. And he wrote a lot for that too. Manhunt 1, 2, 3 are anthologies of different characters, of different writers. This one, Manhunt 4, it's just all Jack Ritchie stories. So I got both of those. The ones I've read now are very cool. They're like the old the style of writing is the old Alfred Hitchcock mystery TV show, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. So stories with not really detectives, not crime stories, but malice domestique. People trying to kill their wives or whatever, and then getting caught out at the last minute, or sometimes not getting caught, or sometimes getting caught in a different way. So those I'm enjoying right now. not really freaking out. Books, so those make me happy because I really love, and because the stories are very short, and they're all like 5-6 pages long, but they almost always pack a punch, so you can pick one up anytime. Another book that made me happy was a Japanese crime novel from the 50s called Tokyo Express, at least that's the American title, by Seicho Matsumoto. If you look back 2 or 3 videos, not that very far back, it's one of the books I bought at the airport last year. It's like 100 pages. It's a very beautifully constructed whodunit mystery, which has to do a lot with train timetables, well, mostly train timetables, and cover-ups, and elaborate plan to unravel this mysteries. There's a couple different cops involved in different parts of the country. It's a fantastic procedural because it's so well done, worked out. It's like the Agatha Christie kind of thing where everything's worked out so perfectly that it's just beautiful to watch, like a perfectly designed puzzle. And he wrote very many books, I think, but not a lot of them are published in English. So again, I'll put all these names in the comments. No, I won't. I won't remember who I talked about. But Seicho Matsumoto, Tokyo Express. Most beautiful book you bought so far this year? I only bought 2 books. I bought that book and one other, and I guess that was the prettier paperback. So, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? Okay, I bought a ton of stuff. I won't get to any of this stuff, so what's the difference? But it's the last question, so I'll wrap it up with this. Oh my goodness. Well, I've got some books I'm planning to read for Rocket Summer, so I'll do those. I bought all the Del Rey, is it Del Rey, or whoever is doing the Howard collections. I bought all 6 of them, like the collected horror stories of Howard, the historical stories. I wanted to read one of those each month by the end of the year, and I guess I still could, but I've got other stuff to read, so who knows what's going to happen. Getting along here, but I do want to go back to see what else I want to read. The Confidence Band by Melville. I've never read that book. It's one of his later books, very modernist book by Melville. I don't remember how it got on my radar, but I want to read that for sure this year. I'd like to read this horrific book. I know it's going to be horrific because it relates to many horrible things that are going on in the world today. These cover-ups in plain sight. I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but this is a horrible child abuse crime syndicate that was broken up that no one cares about until the next time. And apparently now no one cares again because we just got the news that Jeffrey Epstein did nothing wrong, according to the latest news from the latest FBI regime. Here's a book I've had I bought this book this year. I've wanted to read it for a long time. I never bought it as a print copy just because it's like this big with like tiny little print. I thought I'll never get through that, but I love Frederick Pohl. He had a very long career and very different phases of it. So I've always enjoyed his stuff very much. So I want to read this, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of stuff in here that I've never seen. There's one great Frederick Pohl story. I don't know if it's in here or not. I have no idea what the title of it is. It's about these people who have their minds taken over by aliens that work with the U.S. government, and they'll take and they have business they want to do on Earth. They're very commercial aliens, and So they'll take these humans that are considered low-value humans by human society, so like homeless guys or whatever, and put like, it's a very long time ago I read it, so I don't know if they do something to their mind or if they implant them with something and just make them their messengers to go around Earth and go file papers in the most menial things you could do, but they don't give them breaks or anything, or they don't give them meal breaks or time to rest or anything, and they're just walking, they're traveling the whole Earth, take this plane here, do this, they're clothes, they're in suits, but their suits are all grimy and old, and they're just being run to death doing like tedious footwork for these very commercial capitalist aliens. And I think it's a Frederick Pohl story, and I think it's a later one from the 60s. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, I could have the author wrong. It's a story I've been looking for years, but just was in some anthology. That's the great thing about these old science fiction anthologies, or even old issues of Amazing or Fantastic or whatever have you magazine that you can find, and you can find the coolest old stories that somehow fall through the cracks, that either weren't by a major author, so there was no way to collect them, or if it is by a major author, they might have a dozen other stories that are more forefront in people's minds. So there's just so many gems out there to keep reading, which is why I don't really care that much about reading new books. Okay, I think that covers it. I'll put this up on Tuesday, I suppose, for Tag Tuesday, whatever. Talk to you soon.